Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressmen because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value.
Start the uprising. Let's start the uprising. It's time to uprise. It's time to uprise. Yeah.
So basically that makes 4, as I
Right on the back, the back of his
head. Back again?
Yeah, hit the back of his head and his neck.
Try to walk silent. Yeah. Water. Silent. Yes. And away. Yes. And back again. And away from him.
As most of you are probably aware, that I'm a victim of government experiments. This experiment is experimenting with advanced technologies that censors the neurological activity in the brain. With these technologies, a number of possibilities that were thought to be the stuff from science fiction, luckily we all know that's not quite the truth. The real reason for this experimentation, generally people are not aware. These things are some of what I'm going to tell you about in this video. First of all, I would like to explain in detail how this experiment is built up. And to give you a better understanding of this, and so you're not just hearing it from me and my own encounters with these technologies and the methods and techniques which are used in combination with these technologies. I have a number of leading experts in this field from different interviews speaking about the same capabilities and methods and techniques which are used alongside these technological experiments. And I will also throughout this video show declassified documents and pattern numbers and even mainstream publishments on these issues to make it absolutely clear that these technologies of various sorts are being used and produced. The same goes for the methods and techniques. There are many documents that explains these methods and techniques that have been and are being used, are well established facts. There can be no argument about this. First of all, I think it would be best to get a better understanding of these technologies and their capabilities. And I will have to take you down a rabbit hole. The first rule that these people have that are using these advanced neurological technologies is that they have to have plausible deniability. So everything they do, there has to be a way out of. The way they do this is always to blame the victim that they are inflicting. There are a few steps that always in these cases are the same. Scripted is the best way to explain this. One is to try to make the targeted victim appear mentally disturbed, and that is probably the easiest thing to do for them, because these technologies are covert technologies which cannot be heard or seen by others than the targeted victim. And this is always the case, but not in my case, and I will get into this much later on in this video.
In every cell phone signal there is a kind of noise also.
Yep.
And that they can modulate the noise and put in information to influence your mind or also get back information.
Oh, that's done. Yeah, they're using that in shops. And a shop was taken to court, and it was in the United States, with this system and using auditory hallucination or synthetic hallucination. A shop was targeting people coming into the shop, and the inventor was told that it would only be used to stop people shoplifting. That when they came in, if they wanted to stop them shoplifting, they would send a message saying, "We're watching you, don't steal that." But as soon as the inventor finished, the shops and maybe the government, but somebody said, well, hang on, if we change the message, instead of saying don't steal that, buy it, we will make a profit. And a shop made, I think it was $600,000 using this in 9 months, and they were taken to court. But the government argued, from the transcript I had, the government argued that the system was harmless and no laws were being broken. It is not against the law to send somebody a message.
And it was not a subliminal message. It was
auditory, synthetic telepathy. They're arguing that it's like music. The message goes into the brain and you hear music. And the lawyers couldn't find a charge because it wasn't against the law. And the government scientists said, well, as far as we're concerned, all of this is safe. Because they use it, they have to say it's safe. And since then, it has spread to other big chain stores. And we don't know now how many chain stores are using this. But now there are big chain stores and fast food outlets that are targeting certain people to encourage them to spend more money. And that's amazing. And you think, well, we're back to where we started. I mean, what else can you ask them to do? Supposing, the owner of a shop gets one of these devices and takes it home. And however the message is sent, maybe from a tape or a bit electronic voice these days, supposing the owner sends the message through the wall to his next door neighbour, saying, I admire you, come and sleep with me, or move because you're not wanted here, or you can send it across the street. I mean, somebody's only got to buy one of these and start using it for their own devices, and then we're back to where we started, where you've got people hearing voices and they're getting confused.
Synthetic telepathy, this is what they call it themselves. This is where there's a voice projected into your head through an electromagnetic beam that interferes with your own biological impulses that run through every human being in this world. And this way they can make you think that their thoughts are your own. This can be done a few different ways. Either a voice like the one you have when you read a book out loud in your head, or the other way, which is more difficult to tell apart from your own. I call this silence mode, where it's just a thought. So obviously, if you're not aware that you're being targeted, then this is the most likely way they would try to influence you into thinking or acting differently than you otherwise would have done. They also have the capabilities to morph any voice of any person they wish to use, and this is very easy for them, because all they need is a voice sample of the specific person's voice, and these samples can be taken from a variety of places. Often they would choose a person who is close to you and you have some kind of trust in this person, and therefore they often choose voices of people you know. Or if you are a religious person, it's very common in targeted individual communities that people speak of the voice of God or angels. So when they have the specific sample that they intend to use, they run the sample through a computer program where they encode the microwave signal with the specifics of the voice and the command they wish you to hear. And you will perceive these signals with the specifics because it's in human range of frequencies. So your mind will not be able to tell apart from biological impulses to synthetic signals. And I can imagine this is where the name originates from, synthetic telepathy.
There are acoustic technologies. American Technology Corporation produces a weapon that's classified as non-lethal that can project sound into people at a distance, very focused beam. And some of the capabilities are often called voice of God weapons. So you can trick somebody into believing they're hearing the voice of God. You can brainwash them to do almost anything. The Sony Corporation has 4 patents in the patent office for direct neural stimulation for gaming applications that utilize ultrasonics, which causes a mechanical deformation in the ion channels of neurons. And you can time it just right, you induce a signal or a virtual a reality experience. There's another company, Japanese Telecom, that has a pair of headphones that actually induces a small electric current into the inner ear, and with a joystick you can control somebody's movement due to balance. So there are a lot of applications that are already coming out in the civilian world that are about 30 years behind the military technology.
And now the information is coming out. The things that we thought were theories 10 years ago are now things that they brag about on Defense Tech and other related publications.
They can use these technologies other ways than just project voice and sounds, because all these technologies work around the same principles. So all they're really doing is changing the modulations in which the pulse frequencies are being modulated to specific purposes. There is 1 to 600 different pulse frequencies, and all of these many different pulse modulations have a specific purposes, which all of them affect the human mind and body in different ways. I will mention some of these to give you a better understanding of these technologies. They can affect any human emotion, everything from anger, fear, confusion, disorientation, depression, paranoia, the inability to think, a lack of motivation, depression, the inability to make decisions, sadness, happiness. All the pulse frequencies can be set to cause drowsiness, sleeplessness, lethargic, suicidal tendencies, manic behavior, hyperactivity, hallucinations, auditory and visual, or they can affect any other brain-body organ function by stimulating the specific parts. Like, if they want you to produce more adrenaline, they would stimulate the adrenal glands with a pulse-modulated frequency that will make you produce more adrenaline. And the same goes for dopamine levels in your brain or any other gland or chemical producer in your body. So this can really have a profound effect, because we all naturally produce these chemicals in our bodies under different circumstances, which can and is being manipulated with these technologies for all the wrong reasons. Let's say they want to affect any other human function, this is possible too. Like the heart, for example, they can cause you to have a slight change in heart rhythms, or if they want to target the motor complex in your brain where your movement is being coordinated with your nervous system, this can affect your movement. Same goes for any other brain region to have the desired effect. These technologies have the capabilities of hacking and altering every part of any human, because the way we are built up as human beings, with a biological system that runs with electrical impulses, where everything we do, say and see, and even our 5 senses, comes from signals being sent from the nerves to the central nervous system to the brain, where the signals are being decoded into information which we can interpretate as whatever the impulses are supposed to mean.
Modulate this information on the carrier wave. Do you know whether they modulate the amplitude or the frequency?
They can do either. They can do either. If you modulate the amplitudes, you will get more energy. If you modulate the frequency, you will get more vibration. You can do either. It depends on the energy. You'll probably end up doing both. But you would, with the noise, you can also put in anything from the 1 to the 600 pulse frequencies as well. So you could make somebody feel incredibly happy and indecisive or decisive, so they will buy something or do something. You can also put in the pulse frequencies.
Psychic warfare, information warfare, psychological warfare. So it spans a very large group of classifications of weapon systems and warfare systems. people sort of assume what I can't see can't hurt me, and that's just, obviously wrong. We see only a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. We don't see all the radar light we're bathed in. So the way that there are many types of directed energy weapons. Most people immediately think of the simple ones, the lasers, microwave weapons, like ADS, active denial service. And that's not how the system works. It uses something much more complicated that directs energy at specific human beings, but it's a very small amount of energy, but it's directed towards a biochemical mechanism, the ions that are used in the electrical system of your brain, of your nervous system, and of your heart. And it uses a technique called ion cyclotron resonance. So the directed energy that most people assume that it's being done near field, somebody in the apartment next to me is targeting me, it's actually a global system and can only be done on a global basis through a distributed grid of arrays, and they call it ionospheric holography, ionospheric heaters, ionosondes. They go by a lot of different names, but it's all the same weapon system. And the best term that I usually use are radar weapons. Mm-hmm. And anything you can get a signature from through this grid, you can very precisely target energy back to them. And it really becomes while the victims feel like they are being fried from this energy, it's really a nervous system weapon that causes all the same stimuli as if you're being tortured in a variety of ways, mm-hmm. As well as specific mind control thoughts, tactics.
Another capability worth mentioning with these neurological technologies is what you can call a virtual reality experience. This capability, they can create a virtual story and an environment which is played out in the brain of the targeted victim, which you would perceive in the same kind of way that you perceive a dream in your sleep. You can also call this dream engineering. The way this works is the same way that we perceive what we look at with our eyes. This is an example. Imagine you're looking onto a field in the countryside where there's an old house with some farm animals. How do we know what these things are? Because we have learnt that a house is a house and a field is a field, and so forth. But what the eyes are really seeing is a load of information which then gets decoded in our brain to information that we understand. So this is how the eyes can be boycotted, and the synthetic signals will be sent directly to the brain, where we interpret sight in the visual cortex, where the visual cortex will communicate with the hippocampus in the brain, where memory and associations are stored. It's very much like the same principles as synthetic telepathy, just sight instead of sound. And if anyone should have any doubts that this is feasible, they only have to do a little research on a bionic eye and see how that works, which is mainstream and in the civilian world, which is 30 years behind the military complex and governments and agencies and telecommunication industry.
This is where the weapon system gets so amazing. We're going to take a step into the future now. It's actually the past. That's the only way people can believe that it exists. 1980 or 90, George Bush Sr. declared it the year of the brain. They were going to completely decipher it, and you can they did it. They actually deciphered the human brain. Everyone is just variances off of fundamental common algorithms. This is what makes us all human. And so any part of the brain can be connected to. That's why they're called neurological weapons, but it goes way beyond that. Mm-hmm. And, the positive uses get very exciting. Yeah. But at the time, I only studied the negative uses, and mm-hmm. those are the people that are most vocal, and this is the weaponized uses. So yes, remote viewing, this is how it's done, is that you can modulate into the visual cortex of another human brain, let's say in a sensory deprivation tank, or vice versa. You can create sort of a new sense, a sixth sense will be grown in, and they will be able to see visions of ghosts and demons and whatever they project.
There is two capabilities with the neurological weapons that goes hand in hand with the synthetic telepathy and the virtual reality experience. One of them is that they have a method for wiping the memory clean, so this means they can delete things from your memory. I'm not exactly sure how this works, but I can say with certainty this is possible. They nearly always do this to me when they have used the virtual reality engineered experience on me in my sleep. And there is two reasons for this. One is they don't want me to know what they are fabricating in these virtual reality engineered experiences for the public's eyes, which I will get into later on in this video. And the second reason is that they are trying to imprint these fabricated stories in my mind, which is another capability that they use. They can create a false memory set into a person's head, and if you are not aware, you can be led to believe that these false memories, which are created and placed in your brain, where memory is stored in the hippocampus, you can suddenly start to believe that these memories are your own, but yet as fake as a $3 bill, as Dr. Nick Begich says it nicely.
Again, a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but one of the effects that the CIA has been working on for a long, long time with all these neurological weapons is how do you place false memories? Remember, there's this big organization called the False Memory Syndrome, and you track back a lot of the people that started that. They were on the CIA payroll, it turns out. And what it is they're real memories, but they're false events physically. But the brain doesn't distinguish between the two. So you can create, virtual memories in people, and some of the people fully believe that actually these events actually happen to them. And, I know that they're neurological test subjects, and because the experience is so intense, you cannot talk them out of it, that it really happened. But the trauma, the long-term trauma done to the person is very real.
Memory, it's being even played off in terms of Gulf War syndrome, and in terms of the shock that people come out of the war with. The shock, the fear, the memories, the post-traumatic stress syndrome that boils out of these war efforts. And so what are we hearing about? Ways to wipe the memory clean so people can forget all those bad experiences. Do they really go away, or do they just get driven deeper into the subconscious where they do their real work at breaking down the consciousness of a human being, where they can't get played out, they can't get worked out, they get suppressed, and suppressed conflicting ideas are the root to a lot of the psychosis we see in the world today. This is the solution of military planners. Wipe out the memory of the gladiator so they don't know what they did. And somehow that will excuse the behavior and save that person's soul. No, it won't. It'll mask the pain and let it break out in some weird, irrational way, because that's what happens when you suppress these kinds of memories. Secondly, maybe we want these guys to remember what they did because maybe some of the things that they were directed to do they shouldn't have done in the first place. Maybe the memories that they have of the abuses that we inflict on others are memories that somebody ought to be testifying to someday, instead of bearing because now we have a technology that can mask the behavior of our troops in combat. That's not the answer.
ADS is the technology that has been declassified. ADS stands for Active Denial System. This is a directed energy weapon, classification non-lethal. This system is used for crowd control. It works by sending a high-powered microwave beam that heats the surface of the skin of the targeted individual to unbearable levels of pain and discomfort, without leaving a mark because of the penetration only goes a few millimeters into the skin, just enough to get the nerves. The best way to describe the feeling of being roasted with this so-called non-lethal weapon is by having your head too close to a very hot oven. These are some of the possibilities with these technologies. Some are used more than others. This is personalized to whoever these people decide to target. And it all boils down to behavioral modification. This is a term they themselves like to use, because people are nearly in all cases controlled by their emotions. And this is why this really is a weapon. They call technologies like these non-lethal weapons, but the name for these kinds of weapons should surely be called self-inflicting lethal weapons. And this is another one of their rules. Their purpose is nearly always not to cause bodily harm to any of their targets with physical contact. That's why these methods are called non-touch torture techniques, trying to cause such a disturbance in the lives of the targets that we ourselves cause own bodily harm. Suicide is not uncommon for targeted individuals. Another factor worth mentioning is self-discrediting, because if you try and tell your doctor or any other institution or family member or friends, it's very easy to end up in a mental institution under false pretenses. Because what you are explaining is synthetics, mimicking what you normally call schizophrenia or delusional disorders. So this is where you have to be extremely careful not blabbing away to just anyone about these things without having it all down to scientific explanations and some proof. And this is another reason why I myself haven't been more public than I have, but now I'm more confident with explaining these certain technologies used on me. And I have enough proof to back me up in my announcements. Here are some of the names these technologies are going under: directed energy weapons, wireless cybernetics, bioelectromagnetic weapons, radio frequency weapons, biocommunication, psychotronics, and many, many more.
Called Centurion candidate, some super spy that would be pre-programmed to do destruction or gather intelligence, and if captured would have absolutely no knowledge of any of it. Well, he started this work in the 20s. By the 1930s, his work was classified. By the 1960s, the material he had published, he acknowledged that he created these super spies, that he spent 9 to 10 months, and 1 out of 5 people were subject to this level of programming, where he would subject them to 9 to 10 months of programming where he literally split the personality into 2 separate human beings within the same body, programming one to be the super spy, where they could function in another country without detection, and if captured would have no memory of their true self. And yet when they returned to the United States, this altered consciousness could be re-triggered to remember everything they collected in the foreign country and their true self. The problem is, you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Once you fracture a human being in this way, you've effectively destroyed them forever. He believed this was a good idea, and he advanced this technology. And the same material that he published advancing the idea that using LSD to alter people's consciousness for mind control experiments was legitimized and reasonable and a good thing. That's what he wrote in his published work. At the same time, the Central Intelligence Agency later was revealed to be experimenting with LSD on 8,000 men and women in the armed services alone, not to mention the civilian sector.
Now I will be talking about methods and techniques which are used alongside these neurological technologies. And I'll be speaking from a personal perspective from my encounters with these different methods and techniques. Now I think it's a good time to explain the process that I went through. This is a textbook method of breaking the targeted victim down, and it's called trauma-based mind control. The goal is to break the victim down to such an extent that they fracture the personality within the person, and then build the person up again with split personalities. And there will be different alters within the different personalities without the victim being consciously aware. And here is how this can be done. They create trauma with fear and a constant fear of death, humiliation, often sexual humiliation, make you believe that you are being physically raped. You have no one to talk to about these things that you are being led to believe, because in most cases you have been alienated from family and friends, so you're all alone. And while you're undergoing this psychological torture, they use other methods in combination. Here's a few: sleep deprivation, sensory deprivation, constant verbal abuse while you're awake to your conscious mind and in your sleep to your subconscious mind, where they can and will show you extremely disturbing images. In my case, everything from the most extreme violence of murder and death to the most sick and disturbing sexual images, and I mean sick. This can last from months to years. When it's really bad, you're being bombarded 24/7, 7 days a week. I can say from personal experience with this kind of experimentation, it takes a hell of a lot to get through these nightmares. They're literally going through hell and still haven't come back quite yet. The key to survival in these extreme circumstances is knowledge of what they're trying to do to you. because if you know their procedures, then it's a lot harder for them to try to convince you of all sorts of weird and strange and bizarre things when you have the acquired knowledge of what exactly is going on. And they would try to convince you in so many ways it's unbelievable. When you distance yourself from what they say and show, then you will soon find out that all these scenarios and stories they tell you are scripted, and they will not deviate very much from these selected scripts, and you can catch them out on different lies and contradictions.
There are ways. I haven't heard of that method, but I have heard of other methods where people can be reprogrammed to do, for an experiment, to do what the government wants them to do. And in fact, it's incredibly easy. You can break the average person down for total reprogramming in just 30 hours. And that's without pain, without hypnosis, without drugs. The average person can be broken down in 30 hours. Usually, all they have to do is put you into a cell, no food, no water, no sound, and you're in total darkness. Absolute darkness. No sound, no water, nothing. And within 30 hours, you are hallucinating. Really hallucinating. Then, and this is so easy, I mean, I could do it. And then with, they call it synthetic telepathy. Microwaves can go right into the brain, and you hear a voice. And the psychiatrists beforehand, or the investigators, they would know a voice which you found comforting. Now, for a lady, it may be, if she loved her grandfather, it would be her grandfather's voice.
Oh, really?
If you are religious, it would be an angel, or Jesus, or Mohammed, or somebody. But when you've been in for 30 hours, and you're hallucinating, then the voice comes in. And of course, they can do this straight through the wall.
Yes.
The voice comes in, very soft, very soothing, very calming. Are you in trouble? I really am so sorry. Let me help. And over months or years, however long it takes, you will come just to rely on this voice. And if you don't do what this voice suggests, then the voice disappears and you're back in trouble. So you learn, a bit like heroin.
Yes.
You learn to depend on this very friendly voice. And if you talk to the voice and you're agreeable with the voice, you get food and you get light and and then when you go home, the voice can wake you up in the middle of the night when you're sleeping and ask you questions, and then once you are absolutely totally dependent on the voice, like heroin, it can say, now, the problem that you've been through was caused by, and it could be a religious sect, it could be a group of people.
Yeah, they always come with a false
a group of people, dark-skinned, fair-skinned, whatever, but it will be somebody. And they would say, now what I need you to do is help us defeat these people. And the next thing you've got is a bomber or a murderer or...
The reason for the breaking down of personality with this kind of extreme trauma-based mind control method is that they thought they could turn me into a kind of Manchurian candidate, not for assassinations or super soldier, but for getting rid of me when they were done experimenting on me with the neurological technologies. The way they planned this was that they were trying to program me to be extremely violent and trying to imprint extremely disturbing sexual thoughts to match the behaviour and the thought patterns of a very disturbed and sick monster that they are accusing me to be. If this had succeeded, it would have been the best cover story for them, because of the different accusations are of this very kind of nasty and depraved nature, And another reason for why this is very important for them is that this experimentation is going on in this very public manner. So obviously they had hoped that people weren't going to find out the extent of this experimentation and the many capabilities with these neurological weapons, which people didn't even know existed, and many people still don't. Luckily they did not succeed in these horrendous attempts to imprint this kind of sickening and inhumane behaviour. I was able, by the skin of my teeth, to withstand the psychological torture and the mental rape, because I can distinguish between their sick and depraved thoughts to know that's the synthetics, and I know my own thought processes. If this wasn't the case, I wouldn't have been able to make this video, and I would have been locked up a long time ago.
Groups of that it won't work on.
I think so too, yes.
And I know this when I was, I use the word questioning, but when I was talking to spies and agents and international criminals and terrorists, it was over a cup of coffee, and I spoke to them as if they were ladies and gentlemen, like I'm talking to you. And if they wanted to talk, they did, and if they didn't, they didn't. But over the years, 11 years, there was only one that I never, ever managed to get anything from at all. Mm-hmm. It's unknown, if you had 100 people, how many could be controlled. Probably I would think maybe between 80 and 90 could be controlled. Maybe 1 in 10 couldn't.
Let's venture a bit further down the rabbit's hole. Now I'll be speaking of my encounters with methods and techniques which are used on me on a daily basis. Some of you are probably going to recognise some of the things I'm going to tell you about, and some of you probably will not. As I was saying before, all targeted individuals who are targeted with electromagnetic weapons are in all cases alone with their perpetrators, and only the targeted individual and the people who are in control of what is being sent to you know what you're experiencing. This is where my case stands far out from the rest of the people claiming to be victimised by these weapon systems and the methods and techniques which they used alongside these technologies. As most of you are probably aware, that the experimentation on me is public, so this brings a whole new level to the experimentation which has never been done before right out in the open. And there are a number of reasons for this, and I can say with 100% certainty the reasons you are told are false and fabricated, fraudulent justifications for what they are doing. Another important topic that I'm going to cover in great detail is the infamous COINTELPRO, which is known from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, FBI's infiltration and surveillance counterintelligence program. The techniques from this program are still being used today, only now the program has had an upgrade to match the technological times we're in. And in most cases, these neurological technologies, especially synthetic telepathy, is being used in combination with its COINTELPRO. This is certainly the case in my case. Most people know these techniques as gang stalking, gaslighting, street theatre, but when it all boils down to is this counterintelligence program with an upgrade. This is used for a whole variety of different things to ruin people's lives with different campaigns of different sorts. Here are a few of their tactics: discrediting, disinformation, propaganda, conquer and divide, infiltration, framing, setting people up, falsifying documents, snitch jacket, false accusations, using local authorities wrongfully, incarcerations, prison or mental institutions under false and falsified pretenses, just to mention the most used.
In other words, they don't have to wait for evidence of a crime being committed. They can begin an investigation of a person. That's a really big difference right there,
it's actually even a little more radical than that, Scott.
Okay.
They don't need an allegation. They don't need any fact to suggest anybody is doing anything wrong. They can just start investigating people on a whim under this assessment category. They can even investigate you just to see if you would make a good FBI informant. So, your conduct no longer protects you from, from very intrusive FBI investigations. The types of authorities they're allowed to, under this assessment category, include physical surveillance. They can follow you around from place to place, watch you 24 hours a day. They can task informants to go up and meet with you and your friends and neighbors and colleagues. They can use FBI agents acting in ruse to gather information about you under false pretenses. They can use grand jury subpoenas to get certain telephone records. So these are very intrusive authorities that they're allowed with no factual basis, no requirement that you've done anything wrong or even suspected of doing wrong. So when those were implemented in 2008, the FBI put together an internal policy called the Domestic Investigations and Operations Guide that implemented this 2008 Attorney General guidelines. Well, we got called in last month because they were letting us know that they were going to amend that, just a couple of years later, to give themselves even more authority so that FBI agents could actually start gathering information about you even without opening an assessment. So, even just the minor administrative hurdle of actually opening an official case, they can start collecting this information from commercial databases. These are subscription services, not, just online stuff. That they can go to state and local law enforcement and gather information. Again, this isn't just criminal information. This could be information where you were a victim or a witness to a crime, and they could collect that information without even opening up a case. And so we thought that was extraordinarily broad claim of authority to investigate completely innocent Americans. Now we're back into a situation where the FBI is all but unregulated again and is being authorized by the Department of Justice to investigate completely innocent people. And what happened under the Hoover era when there weren't rules was that people moved from investigating somebody who was actually doing something wrong to somebody who was saying something that an agent perceived as anti-government to somebody who's just, supporting a particular political position, and started using techniques rather than just criminal justice techniques, rather than just charging them with crimes. They were using these other what were called dirty tricks, mailing anonymous letters to your boss to try to get you fired, mailing information to your spouse to cause matrimonial disharmony. I mean, really awful things. And what we've seen since 9/11 when these rules have been changed is the FBI is once again investigating groups because of their political beliefs. There was just a Department of Justice Inspector General report released in 2010 that detailed that the FBI had spent years investigating groups like Greenpeace and People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals and the Thomas Merton Peace and Justice Center for their political beliefs, and were gathering First Amendment information about their First Amendment activities that was being put in FBI files. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, not too surprisingly, once you remove the rules, this type of abuse is going to occur again.
A few words about propaganda. In this experimentation, the human research part of this experimentation is hidden in plain sight under the concept or the game, whatever you want to call it, because the people who are controlling this whole thing don't want you to know that this is a major human experimentation, not just on me, but people in general for many different reasons, which I won't get into too much now. Let's focus on the propaganda and the reasons for this constant propaganda, which demonizes and ridicules me. They need to constantly be spreading this kind of information so people are preoccupied with all the different stories that are coming out, not just over this system but on mainstream radio and television worldwide, because it's so important for them to have the majority's blessings and people who are willingly to participate in the harassment campaigns against me. Because if people were aware of the real reason for this, people would be horrified and scared that this could happen to anyone for no particular reason. So therefore they need to have people are focusing on the concept and everything that goes with it, which is 90% fake and fabricated, synthetics and virtual reality animations, because people have tendencies to believe everything they see and nearly everything they hear. But with these technological systems, this can be manipulated and fabricated to decide reactions they want people to have, and therefore generally people are focusing on the distraction instead of the very clear picture of a systematic experimentation. Okay. And this is why you see more propaganda when I come forward with information that clearly presents so many lies and contradictions in their stories about me. So they flood the system with information that demonizes or ridicules me depending on the situation. So people won't take me seriously or won't look into the different information, where people will be able to find out that these people are not looking to end this experimentation, and will even be able to find out that these people do not have our best interest in mind at all.
Use entrapment types of methods to gather information.
How widespread is entrapment among law enforcement agencies in the U.S.?
In my experience, and I've worked with several federal agencies and several local police departments as an informant. And I'll tell you this, on each and every operation and case I worked on, a large degree of entrapment is the principal method. That's not justice. That is a grave injustice. And I believe the FBI must rethink their policies and procedures, because I believe that entrapment creates enemies. Because all entrapment really is the bottom line, it is setting someone up.
Now let me tell you how this is built up. They use everyone for their own means, and the things that they are promoting are scripted procedures from COINTELPRO, where you who participate in actively using these promoted techniques on me are taking the role which under normal circumstances would be agents or private security operation style operatives, who would be using these techniques to try and create fear and or humiliation to discredit me in public. And not only that, also to ridicule me so people won't take me as seriously as they otherwise would have done. And this is where the people who participate uses the intel which is being given to them through these technological means, where all the people who have the capability means to listening in onto this two-way communication system, which really is a controlled environment because they are the only ones who have the power to control when the system is turned on or off for the public, or edited when it's beneficial for them, where you the people are being shown and told a variety of strange and perverted, twisted and bizarre stories about me. These people in control of this experimentation are using the technological means to create fraudulent fabrications through their system. You are being told that these false fabrications are reconstructions of real-life scenarios, and this is why people are gladly participating in these horrendous COINTELPRO techniques, which are designed to make me act out towards people in an unjust way. Because, as you all know, that you have been told never to give anything away and always deny everything and anything. So this is why I cannot just put people straight when these stories of various sorts are being regurgitated from what people have heard or seen, or even commanded to harass me with. Because if I do so, there's a good chance of me being labelled as having a mental disorder, and they would force me into a mental institution where I would lose all my human rights as a human being, and they could freely experiment on me further without even breaking the law, where I would most likely suddenly disappear or die under mysterious circumstances. And this is their goal with using common people to act out their techniques for them, and they would have plausible deniability because they are not involved physically speaking, and obviously they will deny having anything to do with what is going on over this system. So this is how this experimentation on me with these technological means can be ongoing, because they do not want to pursue their own accusations against me in the court. So therefore I never have the opportunity to rinse my name from these very vicious and strategical accusations of being some kind of pedophilic monster. And this is purely the most effective method of controlling people and their belief systems, at the same time having the public's blessings to do whatever they feel like.
We've got two things happening here. We've got the attack on children and young people to destroy their morality. In fact, you could say it's the first stage in starting to groom them the way a paedophile would want them groomed.
TSA, groping them, they admit that's training.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that's going on, of course, is that the practice of paedophilia, of child abuse, is actually a weapon that the other side uses to control people. And what I can say is that when I joined the Navy back in 1972, you were taken through a security vetting process. They wanted to know whether I was a womanizer, did I use drugs, did I get drunk. What the security services were looking for were any dirty little habits that could then be used to blackmail me. We've now got to the stage by this progressive decline in morality. We have British politicians who take drugs. We've got the British politicians who steal their expense money. We've got British politicians that use prostitutes, male or female, it doesn't matter. They're having affairs, they're swapping wives. Now, the moment that is normal behaviour, how do you blackmail them? Now, what is the one thing left? Well, there's two things left that you can blackmail people over. One is the abuse of children, and the other is bestiality. So there's a gentleman, a senator in the island of Jersey, the Channel Islands as we call them, between France and Britain, and the senator of Jersey, he was called Savray. He stood up and warned people about the abuse of children in Jersey, and in particular in the children's home Haute de la Garenne. He was hounded out of his job. He was victimized. But he said one thing which is such a powerful statement. He says governments love nothing better than paedophilia, because paedophilia is the means by which they can control people. So you've got these very, very dark people at high level. They want to draw politicians and bankers and top policemen and militarymen into this depraved area of child abuse, because the moment they've been caught in that net, they can be blackmailed to do the rest of their bidding.
And this is why they have their second objective. This method is referred to in the COINTELPRO documentation as a snitch jacket. It means labelling someone as a snitch or an informant. And in my case, even leading people to believe that I'm an agent of some kind. All three have been pursued in several attempts to have me killed, because I'm speaking out. And obviously this gives them plausible deniability. Let me tell you how they can do this. They use the neurological technology to create fraudulent fabrications of different scenarios, to make people believe that I have grasped people up in the past before I became a targeted individual. Where they use the technological means the same way they do with accusations and using members of the public to participate in the COINTELPRO harassment campaigns against me. So all they have to do is take a situation out of one's life, which they can do through this technology, and reconstruct it to their benefits. So if they want someone to believe that you have grasped someone up, they will take a given story that they know that the specific group or person that they want to use to take care of their problem for them knows about. So they use the fundamentals from the real situation or story and reconstruct it in a way that they still have some of the fundamentals from the real story, which the group or person will be able to relate to. And from there they build on these points. They create a fabricated version of the given story, in which will be created in such a way that the targeted group or person will be led to believe that the story or situation that they knew of or were involved in was completely different to what they thought from the beginning. Where obviously it's created in a way that you are snitching on the specific people who are targeted to carry out their dirty work for them. So this is a very effective tool to take someone's identity and causing death by spreading lies and disinformation in the person's name. And this technology even gives them the capability to change one's history from any given point in your life.
For over a year. But I disagree. And the reason why I disagree is because entrapment methods never stop. It always grows. There's no boundaries for it. If I can seek out an individual and get them, coerce them in some way to do something they normally wouldn't do, that behavior from the informant only grows into more of a violation, more severe violations of the civil rights of Americans. So I think entrapment alone must be stopped.
Did you use any information that you acquired to create other informants?
Yes, that was part of my role on Operation Flex. For example, in my conversations or in their private conversations, let's say certain things would come up, like if a Muslim man was married and he had a girlfriend, a mistress, the FBI would use that information to blackmail that individual to become an informant. Or if someone perhaps had a different sexual orientation, the FBI would use that information to blackmail them to become an informant. Or a certain youth, if they had recreational drug use or desire to use certain narcotics on a misdemeanor level, the FBI would use that to blackmail them to become an informant.
Another COINTELPRO technique, which they often use as well, is the instigating technique. They provoke other people around me in my name to make other people act out towards me. This can be in the form of violence or provocative behaviour to cause a reaction in the same kind of manner. So if this technique succeeds, then the chance of escalating conflict between me and the third parties are much higher. Obviously this is their goal, because then they can come in and take advantage of the situation they have created. This is a classic problem reaction solution recipe, and in my case this is very easy for them to do. They just have to present themselves as me, because no one really has a chance of knowing who's saying what. So this can quickly lead to dramatic situations where they are the puppet masters, where they can sit back and wait for an opportunity to occur. And since everyone has the means to listening in onto this two-way communication system, they take full advantage of this technique. They use this kind of strategy towards people they think are not following their guidelines that they have set, or whom are too passive in their harassment campaigns against me. So they are really pushing and harassing other people into harassing me, because no one likes to be harassed or provoked. So I often see people from the general public who are really just minding their own business and not getting involved, being pushed extensively until they join in with the other people whom are harassing me with COINTELPRO techniques, as explained earlier on. Another observation, same kind of strategy, is they often single people out whom are men and look like they could have a temper, and or they have observed over time that they have a slight tendency to be easier to be pushed into doing something that they otherwise wouldn't have done. And of course, anyone that has the means of listening in onto this two-way communication system also are giving out their own biological prints. And when I say biological prints, I mean they have the ability to read your emotions. If you're either in an agitated state or in an angry state or any other emotion that gives out high level of energy. And these agitated states of emotion, our bodies are producing slightly more heat, which all people do when we are in different emotional states. So they really have the means to push people far beyond what is normally considered possible without even being there physically. This is a frightening reality we need to be facing.
After 9/11, some other interesting ideas started being fielded. One of them was utilizing the knowledge of the brain to really look at, in the same way you walk through a metal detector to find out whether you're carrying the gun. The idea was being put forward by a group of electrical engineers that what we could do is capture the signal intelligence. In other words, the brain activity of those passing through a receiver, so that we could actually look at people that were experiencing high degrees of agitation or fear, the kinds of emotions that might make someone more of an interest before they board a plane. Although I think a lot of people have fear of flying, so you'd get a lot of false reads as well. But these are the kinds of ideas that are being kicked around by military planners around the world.
The dangers of non-ionizing radiation. Something else they don't want you to know, that this system runs on signals which are in the electromagnetic spectrum, which means these signals being sent to you are non-ionizing radiation, which can cause a range of different health effects. And there are set guidelines that have to be followed by international and national law. Some of these health effects are the risk of cancer, tumours, neurological disorders, behavioural changes. There is a chance that women and girls can be severely damaging their ovaries, especially in girls because they have not fully matured yet. And if this happens, they have genetically done damage for the following generations to come in the same family tree because of the non-ionizing radiation. I will show the guidelines are documented facts on these health issues, where you see that the guidelines show the maximum exposures between 6 and 30 minutes maximum. So how governments are allowing this to go on without even telling their populations of the dangers of which can follow is an absolute disgrace. And this is just by listening in onto this two-way communication system. This is another reason why this concept and experimentation is not just about me and these fabricated accusations, as most of you should know by now. It's a whole lot bigger than that and a lot more complicated than the eye seems to see. I think this is a very important issue to let everyone know of.
For microwaves, they will just go straight through your house. And of course, what people don't understand is if they're going straight through your house, they're also going straight through you.
And is that dangerous? We're told by the government that they're safe. Is there scientific proof to show that they're not safe?
There are some 8,300 papers, to my knowledge, going back to 1971, where it was proven in government documents that low-level microwaves will cause injury. The main symptom for microwave sickness, it is usually a suppression of the immune system first, followed by neurological problems where the brain is being affected, depression, suicidal tendencies. You will have more colds, more coughs, longer colds, longer coughs. And then at the other end of the line, if you are unfortunate, lymphoblastic leukemia or something in that area. It affects, in order of people, it is always the embryo and children who are affected most seriously and first, followed by women, without being sexist, because they have very complicated hormonal systems that are affected by microwave technology. Then usually the sick and the elderly, and finally fit young men. So there is in fact an established pattern for microwave sickness.
And you mentioned cancers. Are we seeing an increase in the number of cancers?
Oh yes, and going back to your previous question, there is absolute proof. There are, to my knowledge, to date, there are 4 High Court judgments proving that low-level microwaves will cause cancer. There are 12 epidemiological studies showing that people who live around transmitters, particularly within 500 metres, will get more cancer, more neurological and psychiatric illnesses than people who don't. And there are, to my knowledge, 20 if you count my latest one, there are 19 published legal judgments, not high courts, but legal judgments from mayors, councils, magistrates, ordering transmitters to be taken down, where it is believed that they have caused cancer to the local population. So there is lots of proof, and 2 of the epidemiological studies, And by that I mean, for anyone who's not sure of the word, a study for about 10 years, studying all of the doctors' records, all of the populations. 2 of them were carried out by the industry itself on its own product. And its own conclusion was that these microwaves can cause cancer. So there is plenty of proof, government proof, legal proof, research proof. There is enough proof as to win high court cases, and people are.
The bigger picture with using these neurological technologies, I think it's fair to say that these technologies are being introduced into the civilian world because there is a whole range of different applications that these technologies could be used for in the civilian world, which will give governments a hell of a lot more power and control over their populations, where everyone is already more or less locked onto a security grid, because everyone has the means of listening in onto this two-way communication system that has been set up over the last 2 years under false pretenses, where everyone has been told that this whole experimentation and the concept, which everyone is paying close attention to worldwide, is to solve horrendous crimes of me being accused of being a paedophile, where these accusations have been played out over this technological system, which everyone has been able to follow over the internet and over this two-way communication system, where I have been labelled and judged from day one without ever being charged or prosecuted for any of these false and fabricated accusations. This has been purely for self-justification for this atrocious human research experiment. So this way the end justifies the means, and the means is to implement these technologies on a wide scale without people being outraged and horrified that this kind of inhumane treatment and publicised demonisation can happen to anyone for no particular reason. And not only that, also the privacy issues with being under surveillance and broadcasted it worldwide. So they have had to make and create an elaborate fiction, and this has been possible by using the classified advanced neurological technology, because the general population haven't got a clue what is possible with technologies that people didn't and many still don't know exist. So therefore this has been able to go on for as long as it has, without people really being bothered that this is happening, and in this public manner that it is. Because as long as they can justify themselves, this keeps the general populations focusing on the distraction instead of the real objectives and the agendas that are very clear to see if you only look. But obviously they know that people are generally very busy with work and other things like family and sports and so forth. And people have very bad tendencies to believe everything that governments and media tells them to believe. And this technology is so devious and sophisticated that you have to know the capabilities and the minds of the people who are operating these weapon systems to know the real truth. Because this way of propagating to the world is surely the most effective PR propaganda machine ever to be used. So therefore mass populations are being desensitized to government tyranny, where torture and endless harassment campaigns are a good thing, even cool and trendy, and even funny. But what people are not thinking is that we the 99% are losing our natural born freedoms and liberties, where our rights are being more and more reduced. And this is not just in my country here in Denmark where this experimentation is taking place, but everywhere where people are being shown and told that this is what governments are capable of doing to their citizens, and governments can and will publicise and demonise and ridicule a person or group to turn the public against the group or person. And this experimentation and the concept is setting a precedence, not just for us but for the many generations to come. So your children and your grandchildren's future are going to be affected by this, because governments are getting away with everything without even having probable cause. And since they do not want to pursue their own accusations against me, and not even willing to acknowledge what millions of people around the world are well aware of, this means they cannot be held accountable for this gross violation of human and constitutional rights. My rights have been completely abolished. This way they are above the law. And just think the many different capabilities with these neurological weapons that you have witnessed yourselves. think of this being fully implemented in our daily lives across society, and will most likely be mandatory sooner rather than later. This is the reality we need to be facing in the 21st century. Now I will explain in detail what they also are constantly trying to accomplish. This is a part of the COINTELPRO program, where their mission is to have me institutionalized into a mental institution, because then they can't be held accountable for this experimentation and the concept. This is built up on a few steps. The first is, as explained earlier on in this video, using public people around me to discredit and ridicule me in hopes of me acting out towards the people who are constantly harassing me with the information which is given out over this system. The second step is using education institutes where I'm currently at school. They use teachers the same way they use people from the general public. The only thing is that the teachers have some kind of authority, which means when they join in with the students in the harassment campaigns, they have authority to note and report on me. So anything that I am retaliating with verbally is being noted and reported. So the way this looks in the reports that I'm just acting out towards people for no reason whatsoever, because they are obviously denying doing or saying anything. And this way, they make unofficial instigated and propagated reactions official in their reports on me. I'm obviously aware, so I keep my retaliations on a very low, and have to take a lot of shit and listen to so many lies that is unbelievable, which in a normal situation never would be this way. But because people see how governments are promoting this kind of behaviour, even encouraging people to do so, and a lot of people think if they only stick together and deny everything and anything, they can get away with anything, which obviously is ridiculous and pathetic. Let me tell you about some covert attempts to try to have me committed into a mental institution. This is also mentioned in the COINTELPRO report, using government institutes wrongfully. In these attempts, the job centre was falsifying reports on me, with the purpose of labelling me with having some kind of mental disorder. And not only that, tying together some of the unofficial information and accusations together in this report officially, without ever even had talked to me about any of it. They actually went so far to say and write in the report that I was made aware of this information which was written in the report, without me even knowing anything about anything other than about study and my future possibilities with an education and so on. And I obviously have proof of this, which I'm going to present in this video. And I have stated that fact to Job Centre on several occasions, without them ever asking to what proof I had on the falsified reports, and of them trying to label me, which is obviously not in their own best interest. And not only that, this is a criminal offence as well. So why are they not interested in knowing what proof I have? Obviously because this experimentation is ongoing in this public manner. So they know what proof I have, and know it's enough to break and destroy this whole concept and the experimentation. So they are just ignoring the information and standing by their falsified attempts to character assassinate me, and trying to have me committed under false pretences. This gives a pretty clear picture of how high this goes in government, and their willingness to try and do anything that gives them plausible deniability. And that is even when everyone is watching closely worldwide. That's how corrupt my government is, and the people in control of this experimentation are clearly above the law and will not let themselves be held accountable for anything. Now I will be presenting documentation on all my major attempts to get to the bottom of this, with letters to the highest authorities that I could possibly address these issues to. It's important for me to state, before I begin, that the documentation is obviously in Danish. I will translate and explain along the way. My translations can be cross-checked with the documentation that I'm going to present, or the Freedom of Information Act, if people really want to get to the bottom of this. I sent my first letters back in December 2011 to the Minister of Justice. I did not get a reply, so I sent the letter again directly to the Minister of Justice, Mr. Morten Bødskov, which is supposed to be the top authority regarding law, police, secret service, so obviously this is the best place to address these same issues which I have covered in this video, where I explain everything from the accusations of being some kind of paedophile and or rapist to the murder accusation, and explain in detail the very many rumours that have been circulating the world that I was allegedly being kidnapped, drugged and raped. I also explained how the system works to the best of my knowledge back in December 2011, where I explained that all my conversations and movements could be followed from the internet and the two-way communication system, which at that point I didn't know too much about. But I explained as best as I could how the fraudulent cunts were making all kinds of weird and strange and perverted and racial comments in my name. So people were judging me for what they were saying and doing to upset people. I also explained how they were instigating and promoting other people to cause me severe injury or death. I also stated that how the media was propagating the accusations and ridiculing me on national radio and television, without me ever knowing anything other than the very many different labels that I have been given, and how I have never been charged or prosecuted for any of these accusations that have been publicised worldwide. This should cover the most important bits from my letter to the Ministry of Justice here in Denmark. The reply I got was very short and incompetent, not denying any of the above statements, simply not willing to help me, and any further letters for this issue would be dealt with the usual casework ways. I could not expect a reply. A quick reality check. If any government authorities suspect someone of a crime, they have an obligation by law to notify the police, and then the police have an obligation to interrogate and prosecute if the suspected person is guilty beyond reasonable doubt. And reasonable doubt is in most cases settled in court by a judge. That's how the justice system works here in Denmark. Another obligation I wrote in my letter, I suspected that it could be possible that I was being drugged, kidnapped and raped, which are obviously very serious crimes, which under all circumstances would be made an investigation of. Another important issue is the publicising of all the above statements on national radio and TV and privately is obviously not legal either. Not to mention promoting and encouraging people to commit crimes is also very serious. Anyone else doing this would get long prison sentences. And finally, but not less important, is all the gross violations of my human and constitutional rights. The next letters that I sent was back in May 2012 to the Attorney General and the National Police. The closest resemblance to the National Police is probably the FBI. The context of the letters was the same to both places, where you could say the context of the letters was less specific, but yet still specific enough to point out the severe accusations were strategically placed character assassinations to justify the use of the non-lethal weapon system, where I explained a little bit more about the electromagnetic system being used on me than the last two letters to the Ministry of Justice. I obviously explained in the letter the laws and the different conventions that should prohibit the use of these systems on civilians, and I mentioned the Nuremberg Code that prohibits any human research experiment on non-consensual people. I also mentioned how the fraudulent cunts were trying to destabilise me, to have me act out towards people, and how I was being harassed and tortured 24/7, 7 days a week, and I only wanted my life back, and I can and could answer any question that they may have had. This should cover these last two letters. The reply from the National Police was short, and really just saying they didn't have anything to do with inquiries of this kind. They recommended me to go to the local police, which is obviously not the way forward, since normal police have absolutely nothing to do with an advanced system like these. The reply from the Attorney General was somewhat different, but still not willing to help in any way, even that this Attorney General's office had to do with international crimes. And since this has been going on in England and Denmark, and as we can all hear, one part of the people controlling the system are clearly of English entity. So there can be no argument about this is the right place to address these issues too. I was able by law to appeal against the decision, which I did. The appeal was denied, and the reasoning for denial is absolutely disgraceful and corrupt. which makes everything very clear, but I'll get into this letter in a short while. Another factor that I have stated in nearly all my letters to government authorities is that if a person is under surveillance of any kind, there has to be given a warrant from a judge. And the law here in Denmark says, under Administration of Justice, paragraph 783, that if a person is under surveillance for more than 4 weeks thereafter, there has to be given a new warrant every 4 weeks. And obviously there has to be circumstantial evidence of the person committing a crime or has committed a crime, and the surveillance is for investigation purposes. So I have written to the court in my district to apply for Freedom of Information Act to see if there have been given any warrants to have me under surveillance of any kind. My request was granted, and I have a clear message from the court that they have no such warrants given out to have me under surveillance from all the way back to April 2011 until September 2012, and I will obviously be presenting this information. So how can this be when everyone knows that I'm under what you can call very invasive and manipulative sensory input surveillance, which is being publicised worldwide? Here is some more proof that this experimentation is being publicised, and my personal information is being given out left and right. Things like social security number, my address, telephone number, my name, signature, bank details, and of course my private information and thoughts. And all this is without mentioning all the bullshit inputs and virtual fabricated movies that are coming out every single day in my name. The proof that I'm going to be presenting is a clear case of identity theft, where someone has used my personal information that people have been able to hear and see over the two-way communication system to gain themselves possession over my warranty on a bike that I had in a shop to be mended, where the person who has done this has had to know my social security number and my full name, my address and telephone number, and has even been able to do my signature, and not the least have had the knowledge of the bike being there in the first place. This is a hell of a lot of information to know to be pure coincidence. I obviously reported to the police that someone had used my personal information in a shop to cash out a warranty that I still had on my bike, which was being mended, which the police tried to cover this up with saying that this was a theft of a bike, which I have clear evidence of from the shop that this isn't the case. But obviously it leaves government authorities out in the open to be sued in court if they hadn't have covered this up, because as we all know that this information is being given out daily, and some entity in government who are in control of this system are not interested in giving me official proof of what millions of people already know, myself included of course. So I took this to the next level and made a complaint to the Attorney General in this district, where I sent all the evidence of the situation and my conversations with the manager of the shop, who was trying to make it appear as if I had cashed in the warranty on my bike beforehand, coming to pick my bike up from the menders, which I have recordings of all my conversations with the people from the shop. And not only that, I made sure to get the shop manager to write out documentation on what had happened to the money that I had on the warranty. And even though I had all this evidence, even from the shop manager himself saying that someone had gotten the money by using my personal information, and the District Attorney General still went along with the first cover story of this being a simple bike theft, which in any court this cover story wouldn't last a minute. Now to the last letters that I'm going to present. I sent a letter the 18th of June and a second letter on 24th of July. I had to send the letter twice to get a reply. These letters were follow-up letters from the ones I sent to the National Police and the Attorney General's Office for International Crimes. As I was saying before, that I appealed the decision not to make an investigation out of my claims. The appeal was sent to the top National Attorney General, where I specified in much greater detail everything from the very nasty and serious accusations against me to the laws and conventions that prohibited the use of these electromagnetic systems on civilian people. And I did so by finding national and international laws and European Parliament's paragraphs stating that these systems and the experimentations are not to be done on non-consensual individuals. The same goes for the torture and the harassment, which you will be able to see in the documentation. I also stated what I told you early on, with warrants have to be given to have people under surveillance. Another important issue is the diplomatic problems with having foreign intelligence services acting against a Danish citizen on Danish soil. This is a very serious violation of international law, not just against me, to my own government as well. So obviously the Danish government is not only covering this up, but are participating in trying to have me committed and or killed by other non-government entities. Now to the reply, which I didn't get until the 29th of October 2012, that stated that my appeal was not granted, because they are allegedly saying that they did not get my letter until the 24th of July 2012, which is the second letter that I sent, and I have proof of that, which I will present. The reason for the Attorney General to make this statement is that this is over the time period given to make an appeal on an earlier judgment. So they are just denying having received my first letter, which is in the set time frame given to make an appeal, which gives a pretty clear picture of how my own government are doing everything in their power not to give me any form of legal opportunities to have this experimentation and the very many nasty accusations against me trialled in court, not to mention all the above. So this way they can keep the public uninformed and have people believe all their continuous lies that are coming out every single day, which clearly leaves me alienated and disconnected to any form of social companionship, and therefore it's much harder for me to get the truth out there, because I never have the opportunity to be heard on a platform that is not controlled by the fraudulent cunts and their constant campaigns against me. So this is a very cruel and vicious circle that never ends, and they can keep pushing their real objectives and agendas on everyone, while everyone is paying attention to the distraction instead of the real objectives and agendas that are very clear to see. As I said, I have proof of this dirty and corrupt diversion, just to keep this experimentation and the concept ongoing. Don't forget, I also stated the very serious allegations in my letter, and none of the reply letters had mentioned anything about their own accusations, which is completely and utterly unheard of. How a High Attorney General and Ministry of Justice and National Police not replying back on such serious issues? This in itself tells you everything. They are not willing even to acknowledge what they are propagating and promoting to the whole world, because these are strategically placed accusations to have the public's blessings around the world for what they are doing and creating for their own psychopathic and arrogant selfish selves, to make restrictions and reductions of our natural-born freedoms and liberties. This is really a war on democracy and freedom itself, taken over by a bunch of technocrats and bureaucrat elites, policy makers, using technology and science to imprison the souls of free men and women around the world, so we won't revolt against this tyranny that is being pushed from equator to equator. I say no more. Enough is enough. Using this system and the accusations as a political means to control people, and using me as the boogeyman that everyone needs to hate, for pushing this tyrannical dictatorship on us. I say, if they are really serious about these allegations, as they are clearly propagating, then there is no question in my mind that this should be trialled in court once and for all, so not only I can get my life back, but also so the millions of people across the globe can finally see an end to all of this pathetic and absolute ludicrous demonisation and virtual fabricated movies of a very sick and depraved nature. I stand by my innocence in these matters 100%, because that is the truth. And that will never change no matter what anybody says, because I'm not only just saying this, but this can actually be proven as easily as I have proved in this video the corruption and fraud that is clearly going on. To have this experimentation and the concept continued running, I say you the people out there demand to know the truth, and have the truth come out in a manner that is not only constitutional but human, and not some classified system that no one even knows how works and who what the operators are. Let the truth be heard globally, so this kind of thing does not happen again, and the people responsible for this should definitely be held accountable for their actions, and let justice be served. Just like to say thanks to the many people out there fighting against this tyrannical dictatorship that is happening on a global basis, that you give me inspiration to fight against this evil, and I know that one day I will be a free man again. And that is definitely something to fight for, no matter how long it takes or how hard the journey may become. And freedom for me is not only just freedom for me because they have chosen to use this as a means of control on a global basis. So this is definitely going to affect these global agendas that these technocrats and bureaucrat elite policymakers are trying to set as standards for everyone. And that is not freedom or liberty in any way.